And then if you bump into your kids, you're actually doing things.
Yep, we're on.
Good evening, everyone. Here we find ourselves again. I declare the ordinary meeting open. I would like to acknowledge today that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I note that everyone is in attendance and there are no apologies. Item 2 on the agenda is the confirmation of minutes. Firstly, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 18th of June 2020 to be received and confirmed. Do I have a... Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Thank you, Councillor Drusovich. All in favour? Taken as read. Thank and accepted. Secondly, the minutes of the special meeting held on the 10th of July 2020 be received and confirmed. Do I have a mover and a second? Thank you, Councillor Finzel. A second, I'll second. Oh, Councillor Wegner, thank you. All in favour? Thank you.
Councillor Bobby, which special meeting that was?
We have one mayoral minute today in relation to the purchase of 24 Cooroy, Noosa Road, Tewantin, Lot 375 SP 151415, former Tewantin TAFE site. I would like to move that Council note the mayoral minute provided to the ordinary meeting dated 16th of July 2020 and instruct the CEO to discontinue negotiations with the Queensland Government regarding the purchase of the former Tewantin TAFE site located at 24 Cooroy Noosa Road, Tewantin. Agree to instead adopt an advocacy role for potential suitable end users, e.g. leases or purchasers, with these likely to be from the education or training sectors, and request the Chief Executive Officer to write to the Department of Employment, Small Business and Training and to the State Member for Noosa, Sandy Bolton, thanking them for their assistance in this matter to date, and advise of Council's decision not to proceed with purchase negotiations, but to instead advocate for a suitable user to be found to activate the site, reaffirm Council's desire to see the site activated at the earliest opportunity, provide details of approaches to Council from potential end users to date, and offer Council's ongoing assistance to facilitate the activation of the site. The Tewantin TAFE campus was constructed in 2004 by the Queensland State Government. It had a short history, opening in 2006 with 716 students and closing in 2014 with 256 students, many of whom were studying off campus. Since its 2014 closure, the facility has mostly sat idle and unfortunately been subject to vandalism and building deterioration. The site currently remains the responsibility of the State's Department of Employment, Small Business and Training, and through the assistance of the Member for Noosa, Sandy Bolton, and departmental staff, Council has been provided with first option to purchase a site. Sandy has been a strong advocate for this facility being reactivated and has worked tirelessly to support our Council throughout this process, for which we are grateful. On the 20th of December 2018, Council agreed that subject to successful negotiations, the CEO was authorised to purchase the site for up to $1.7 million. Previous reports on the TAFE site outlined its significant environmental values. Following the decision to purchase, it is my understanding that Council Environment staff commissioned a flora and fauna assessment of the site. A number of threatened species were identified, and staff advised that because of this provision, provide for significant constraints on further development on the site beyond the existing development footprint. Also of critical importance is the recently amended State Koala Conservation Plan mapping. New mapping released in April this year now includes the site in a koala priority area and shows koala habitat area present on the site. Strict vegetation clearing restrictions prohibit clearing of the koala habitat areas within koala priority areas. As such, future development is limited to the existing cleared footprint of the former TAFE campus. The protections of the site under federal, state and council statutory provisions now provide significant protection of the site's environmental values. As contractual negotiations commenced with the state, they disclosed that native title still applied to the site, as a result of the state not submitting a native title assessment when the site was converted from a reserve to freehold in 2006, which is a requirement under the Native Title Act 1993. The implications of this disclosure is Council required the state to validate the grant of freehold over the site by entering into an Indigenous land use agreement with the traditional owners, the Cubbi Cubbi First Nation people, prior to the purchase proceeding. These negotiations, due to their complexities, can be protracted with indefinite completion timeframes. Council now finds itself in a continuing impasse with unknown completion timeframes and increased contractual complexity, in addition to the new COVID environment. As part of its due diligence, investigations and evidence-based decision-making process, Council has also commissioned updated building condition assessments, property valuations, economic feasibility and market rental assessments. Previous Council pre-feasibility assessment of the site indicated a range of potential end users and outcomes that would have reduced financial risk to ratepayers. However, staff now advise available options have since reduced as a result of new development constraints and environment protections on the site. Consultants were commissioned to undertake a strategic land use options assessment to assess feasibility in detail. In light of the constraints to expanded development on the site, the use option analysis finds the size and layout of the buildings would suit very limited uses, and the commercial risks to council and ratepayers from managing the site as a rental property are significant. The current economic environment will also make it more difficult to locate a suitable tenant. It is recommended that council act in a facilitation role only in the potential transfer of the site to interested parties from the state government. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on council's finances has required council to make many difficult decisions about priorities and spending, including the completing of importance of new projects. The 2021 adopted budget includes an operating deficit for the first time in many years, and careful management will be required over the next 2 years to return the budget to surplus. Staff have also commissioned updated building condition assessments and an economic feasibility assessment, which indicate the purchase of the site would involve capital expenditure comprising estimated upfront building repairs of $1 million and forecast building renewals to 2030 of approximately $7 million. In regard to purchase price, it is important to note that the cost of purchase for the site is only a minor component of the whole of life cost of owning the facility. Even if the site was gifted to council, a general rate increase would still be required. Community interest in the former Tewantin TAFE site has been driven by a desire to see this important community asset reactivated and reused. That desire is shared by member for Noosa, Sandy Bolton, who has expended considerable effort to date to realise these aims, and we are very grateful for all her hard work. The argument for not purchasing the site has recently become more persuasive, given council's finances having been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, with those impacts now likely to be felt for a number of years within this community. Whilst timeframes for the sale of the site remain uncertain, there is an opportunity for the state to explore tangible opportunities to provide a lease direct to a tenant to allow prompt reactivation of the facility. The interests of the Noosa community are now best served by council formally withdrawing from purchase negotiations and advocating for and assisting the state to activate the site via a suitable end user. We must, as we have said, save where we can to spend where we must. Sometimes the best deals you make are the ones you never enter into. In this instance, it would be prudent to suggest that that was in fact the case. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look, I fully support the Mayor's minute, and I'd like to endorse her comprehensive and well-reasoned comments on this very significant issue. In short, the pivotal points for me are that the uses that the Council was investigating using the site for that gave a viable return to ratepayers are no longer possible under the greater protections on the site, and that involves a biodiversity overlay under the Noosa planning scheme and also koala habitat mapping under the state regulations. The issues of native title, as the Mayor said, still remain unresolved, and there's some sort of an undisclosed liability there that may potentially afflict any new owner. The potential users are now able to directly negotiate with the state owners of the property, and there has been significant interest expressed through staff here and also through Sandy Bolton, and they're now able to more directly negotiate with the state. This decision here today removes the uncertainty and clarifies Council's position, Council's interest, and brings us one step closer to finding an ultimate use, and I'll be supporting the minute.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Anyone else like to talk to the motion?
Like many members of this community, I wanted to see the TAFE site reactivated and reused, and the environmental values of the site protected from private purchase and development. Over the past few months, we've been given options for future use. We've identified and assessed risks and benefits. We've looked at the implications and contractual complexities around the site's native title. We looked at both environmental considerations and financial considerations in depth. We are satisfied that the site is protected under the new Noosa Plains overlays. We're satisfied that due diligence and due process has been undertaken. We are satisfied that the cost to ratepayers in the form of a rate increase would not have been received well in this COVID-impacted climate. And we are satisfied that with the help of our state MP, Sandy Bolton, that the site does not sit derelict, and that Council, by adopting an advocacy role for potential users, we are satisfied that the site will be reactivated and reused as hopefully an education or training facility. I therefore support the mayoral recommendation to discontinue negotiations with the Queensland Government regarding the purchase of the former Tewantin TAFE.
Thank you, Councillor Onston. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Stockwell.
Yes. This is one that I will be agreeing with, but with a very heavy heart. The last time we discussed this, I argued very strongly that this site is a key community asset. It has both social value, economic value and environmental value at the heart of the old part of Tewantin. It's no doubt in my mind that if the state had been able to offer us unencumbered freehold title, that the report we'd be looking at today would be to giving out a lease to one of the worthy groups that may be interested in being there. We would have bought it a year ago. We were quite confident then that we could sustain the ongoing impact on rates. We were travelling at a very high part of the economy. Right now, we've just brought down a budget that we've cut to a point so that we could keep the impost on ratepayers to zero net rate rises for the vast majority of our ratepayers. And we will have to chart a path back from that. Adding with one single asset 1.5% to 2% in future years is just not something that is wise to do at the moment. Part of the reason I've got a heavy heart is I understand the immense amount of work, lobbying and badgering by the member for Noosa. I happened to say to her the other day that if I was still a bureaucrat, I would consider her a nightmare. And that was a compliment, because she goes into bat for this community and no more than on this particular matter. And her aim is to get the site into community ownership. I believe there still is a good outcome, and I believe that stepping back at this point means that we're more likely to get to that outcome earlier than if we would continue the negotiations and elect to try and sort out those encumbrances that currently sit over the site. So for that reason, I support the mayoral minute, but as I say, it's with a heavy heart.
Thank you. Councillor Jurcevic.
This was always the wrong building, built in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's been poorly managed ever since. And the unfortunate consequence is a building of great significant value that was being left to deteriorate by the state government over a long period of time. I've always been cautiously monitoring this situation with regard to the purchase. I've never felt it was our role to purchase this building, but I acknowledge that a great many in our community wanted to see the building put to good use, and probably the only option available was for council to purchase that building, along with the potential for other uses on that site. And since we started going down this process, those uses have diminished. And unfortunately, it doesn't make it a viable proposition for us. But also in these COVID times, it presents a financial challenge for this council to turn around and purchase a building that will potentially inflict somewhere near $1 million to revitalise. Had we been at this point 6 years ago, when the building was made derelict, $1 million could have been saved for the for the state. But here we are now, regardless of who takes the manages the burden of this building going forward. There's an asset that's been left to deteriorate sadly, and this community have seen it and desired to see the building reused and repurposed for many years. I'm hoping that by taking this point that we're not leaving in the hands of the state that won't reactivate the site and won't take that opportunity. There are entities champing at the bit to be on there, as Sandy has well advocated for many years. It's just a matter of having the will and the desire to make it happen. 6 years too late, but I'm hoping that somewhere within the next 12 months that site will be reactivated and we'll have a valued and much respected tenant in for the future of the site. But I concur with all of the points that the Mayor raised in it. I mean, we had an opportunity here to reactivate this site and to purchase this site, but the constraints that we now find ourselves with on this site don't make it a viable option anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, we're going to speak to much. Councillor Fitzgerald,
I would like to say thank you to all the staff and everybody that has worked hard on this, and to Sandy Bolton and all the people over the years, including community, who have engaged at many different levels to keep this site much loved within our community. Today, to reduce financial risk to ratepayers with the current climate, I support this resolution. Vision is the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or vision. Stepping back creates a space which has the potential to be filled and reactivated to a usable site, and hopefully a site which this community can be proud of. So thank you.
I think it's all been said. Thank you, councillors. I think we've all been privy to the information, and I think as hard as it has been, I think this is the right decision for us going forward, and it's the right decision for our community, and I have full faith in our state member that she will find the right tenant for this property. Thank you. We might put it to a vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks, Kylie. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is petitions. I believe Councillor Lawrenston has a petition.
Yep, I move that the petition requesting that Council make Carruthers Court Park, Cooroy, a leash-free dog exercise area, be received and referred to the CEO to determine appropriate action.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Lawrenston?
I'm presenting a petition on behalf of 121 residents and dog owners in Cooroy. They're requesting that Council reverse their recent decision to make Carruthers Court Park a dog leash park and return it back to a leash-free dog exercise area.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Councillor Lawrenston.
Okay, great.
All in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you, Kylie. Does any other councillors have any petitions? No. Okay. Item 5 we move to. There are no notified motions, there are no presentations, and there are no deputations. Item 8, number 8 on the agenda is a consideration of committee recommendations. The first set of recommendations are from the Planning and Environment meeting on the 7th of July 2020, and that is on page 10 of our agendas. Item 1 was referred to the General Committee. Item 2 is for a minor change to a development approval at 36 and 40 Hofmann Drive, Noosaville. Item 3 was referred to the General Committee, and item 4 was referred to the General Committee. Would anyone like to move the recommendation at the bottom? Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Thank you, Councillor Jurisiewicz, second. That's the bottom of page 12 of the Planning Environment Committee recommendations be adopted except where dealt with or held over. All in favour? Thank you. The next set of recommendations are for the Services and Organisation Committee meeting on July 2020. Item 1 is the Noosa Christmas 2019-20 peak period traffic management evaluation. Item 2 is the Community Disaster Response and Recovery Grants, COVID-19. Item 3 is for the Noosa Cultural Plan 2019-2023 implementation update.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drusich.
Second,
Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. The next set of recommendations are from the General Committee on the 13th of July 2020, and this is on page 14. Item 1 is Councillor representation on the Climate Emergency Australia Strategic Advisory Group. Item 2 is the Noosa River Oyster Ecosystem Restoration Project Management Plan. I'd like to pull this out and deal with it as a separate resolution, please. And I have an amended motion.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Declaration of conflict of interest.
That's not. Is that for mine? It's not for mine. It's for
Yeah, it's this one. Yeah, this is the one that there may be a.
That's mine. That's my amended motion.
That's Ramilia's. That's
Yeah,
Amelia's.
I'll just explain to councillors. The Mayor's indicated that she is aware that there may be a amended motion coming forward when the issue of the oyster reefs are being discussed. And the advice I've given her is that it's probably best to do it at the beginning of that process rather than halfway through, even though it's only in relation to a proposed amendment, that the matter is better being on the table while the whole matter is being discussed, not just halfway through the debate when the foreshadowed amendment is going to come forward. So the advice I've given to the Mayor is she should declare that perceived conflict of interest at the beginning of the debate on this issue. So when the foreshadowed amendment comes forward later on, it's already been addressed rather than halfway through.
Okay.
So I think the Mayor should make that declaration now.
I declare a perceived conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 175D of the Local Government Act 2009 due to another councillor foreshadowing that they may move an amendment during debate on this matter that mentions the Masso family. I advise that Michael Masso provided a $500 donation to my election campaign on the 21st of February 2020. I believe that I could consider this item impartially and in the public interest and request to remain in the meeting room to participate in the debate and vote on this matter. Yeah, thank you.
And councillors, once again, a bit like this morning actually with the special meeting, if the Mayor declares a perceived conflict of interest, the Deputy Mayor automatically assumes the chair for this matter to be considered by the meeting.
Mr. CEO, I'll ask a question. The amendment that's proposed to be moved proposes that the fishing families, and I think they're mentioned by name, be included on the technical advisory group. In your opinion, does that constitute a perceived or a real or material conflict of interest?
Yeah, to answer that question, I think this is at what I call the lower end of the scale in terms of that. The foreshadowed amendment does identify that they're looking to include one representative out of 5 fishing families who are identified by name. One of those named families is the Masood family, and one of that members of the family has made a donation to the Mayor's election campaign. And the advice I've given to the Mayor is, as a matter of caution, that should be disclosed, which is always the way with potential perceived conflicts of interest. But as I said, it's probably at the lower end of the scale, if I can use that term, in terms of the nature of that conflict.
Okay. In that case, I'll move the resolution that councillors note the perceived conflict of interest declaration of Councillor Stewart and resolve that this represents a perceived conflict of interest in this matter, and Councillor Stewart may remain in the meeting room to participate in the debate and vote on this matter.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Councillors, as we've heard from the CEO, this is on the lower end. The important thing is that these declarations are made.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You're not standing up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Councillor
Used to the general meeting, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'll get a bit lazy from the general. The families are mentioned, but even if the member of the Masood family was to be appointed to the technical advisory group, there is clearly no material or personal benefit that's going to be accrued by Councillor Stewart as a result of that. So I'm confident that Councillor Stewart can remain in the meeting room and act impartially on the matter, and I hope you'll support me in that.
I think there's two main questions that we've got to consider. First is the reasonable man test. There was a reasonable and fair-minded observer in the room. Would they think that the councillor might make a decision contrary to the public interest? And the second question that I considered is how would inclusion of the councillor in the deliberation of the decision affect public trust? I'm also confident that Councillor Stewart should remain in the room and there would be no conflict.
Yeah, the councillors wish to speak to the motion or questions?
Only to foreshadow that the matter has been up before us, but the only reason that there's a perceived conflict of interest being mentioned here at this time, when we've already discussed the matter at previous committee, was that the mention of the Masood family and the potential of a mention there, and no other reason that there was no requirement to make a declaration of perceived conflict of interest before.
That's correct, because the amendment that's been foreshadowed tonight actually names that the family, and that's why the advice I've given to the Mayor.
Thank you.
There's no further comment. I'll just close by saying I think the decision for Councillor Stewart to remain in the room is a very fair and even-handed decision. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Wegener, that's unanimous.
Thank you. I'll move my motion now.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'll second Councillor Stewart's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. I move the motion that Council note the report by the Environmental Services Manager to the Planning and Environment Committee dated 7th of July 2020 and approve the project management plan provided as attachment 1 to the report as meeting the requirements of the project implementation plan outlined in the Alliance and Funding Agreement, subject to Council approving an independent scientific expert to provide a review of the project's monitoring, evaluation and reporting plan. The review is to include an assessment of the effectiveness of the methodology, project goals, measures, outputs and outcomes within the context of ecological restoration and the terms of the 3-year contract, and recommendations, if any, for improvement to be included in the monitoring and evaluation plan. And note the terms of reference of the Noosa River Oyster Restoration Project Technical Advisory Group provided as attachment 2 to the report, and establish a Noosa River Stakeholder Reference Group to provide strategic input, local knowledge and expertise into river management initiatives, initially providing input into this shellfish restoration project and more broadly into finalisation and implementation of the Noosa River Plan, and delegate to the CEO to determine the terms of reference and undertake a process to establish the Noosa River Stakeholder Reference Group together with the appropriate role for councillor representation on that group.
Sorry, Carly, can you just bring that down so I can see the whole?
Hang on a sec. I'll just move it.
Thank you.
I won't rehash the long and detailed history of this project. I did on Monday at the general meeting, nor will I seek to move further amendments around measurable outcomes and baseline data as I did on Monday. As stated on Monday, I acknowledge and respect the fact that the previous council entered into this agreement, supported this alliance, and we have an existing partnership with TNC. We have a signed contract. I will, however, seek to gain your support for this amended motion. I think it imperative that for this project we provide as much input, consultation, feedback and advice from as many people as we can. Engaging an independent scientific expert can only help this project going forward and provide increased comfort among the community. I would suggest that with this support provided by the previous council for this project, that appointing an independent scientific expert would be a fair and reasonable ask. A review of this project and an assessment of the effectiveness of the methodology, project goals, measures, outputs and outcomes within the context of ecological restoration and the terms of the 3-year contract, and recommendations, if any, for improvement by an independent scientific expert be included in the monitoring and evaluation plan can only be of benefit for all of those concerned. Thank you.
Look, thank you, Mayor. I support this this motion. I think this sort of oversight can only give further assurance to the credibility and professionalism of the organisation that we're partnering with. I understand that they're comfortable with this form of oversight, this peer review of the monitoring, evaluation and reporting plan. Indeed, it will involve criteria and measures that are far more comprehensive, rigorous and relevant, that can stand up to scientific scrutiny far better than any that we as councillors could perhaps come up with, probably with the exception of Councillor Stockwell. And I think it's if this gives further assurance to especially the new councillors, I think that's appropriate and fully support that. And I think in the end it can only add to the credibility, rigour and assurance that is already surrounding this fantastic project and this partnership, which we're very lucky to have.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this motion?
I think,
Stockwell.
yeah, I'm also willing to support it. I think it is a good initiative that places a little bit more oversight from a independent scientific expert. The TNC obviously has a range of scientific expertise in their own organisation, but it is a large contract for this council, and therefore seeking assurance that the processes and methodologies to make sure that we do both monitor and evaluate, because the whole purpose of monitoring and evaluation is actually to get improvement. And so you monitor and evaluate a project so you know if you need to start to make changes during the project, and also to work out what the impact of the project is towards the end. So having an independent scientific expert is a valuable additional element, which will give, I hope, a range of people some satisfaction that all is well.
Thank you. Councillor Wagner.
Well, earlier this week we had a pretty splintered debate over the Oyster project, and having this will bring I think hopefully a new era of looking at the project through the press and get all coming on the same team and really having to look at it instead of us arguing amongst ourselves, having an expert coming down and helping inform us and as well as the entire public on this. So yeah, I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Councillor Drews.
I think scientists are used to peer reviews. I think this is an element of that process. It'll give an assurance to council and to our community that the monitoring and evaluation reporting plan is of the highest degree. I'm sure it is already, but our expert tells us it's the best he's seen in his years on council. But to get that independent scientific expert to give us that assurance, and again, peer review of scientific process is something I'm sure that TNC won't have any issues with, and I'm sure if it adds an extra level of assurance for the councillors, I'm more than happy to support.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion or move an amendment?
No, I just want to speak to it. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for bringing forward this motion. I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor.
I support this motion, but I'd also like to move to amend and note the terms of reference of the Noosa River Oyster Restoration Project Technical Advisory Group provided as attachment 2 to the report, and request the Nature Conservancy to agree to amend their membership of the TAG to include a member of one of the historic commercial fishing families, Mayoral, Burton, Clearys, Clarks, Harpers, to add independent, valuable local input into the project.
No, you can't. Did you move it?
Would anyone like to second that motion?
Oh, I can second that.
Thank you, Councillor Finzel. Councillor Armstrong, would you like to speak to that motion?
I've requested that the Nature Conservancy agree to amend the membership of the TAG to include a member of one of the historic fishing families to add independent local ecological knowledge. I understand that this advisory group is a technical body, so the question here is, can a fisher provide technical advice? According to an article published in the ICES Journal of Marine Science, which is peer-reviewed scientific journal covering oceanography and marine biology, fishers' local ecological knowledge forms, quote, an important part of best available information for fisheries in science and management. There's also many published research articles that agree that local ecological knowledge and formal scientific studies on fish species decline could complement each other. Further, in the General Committee report dated the 14th of January 2019, in relation to the Alliance, there was reference made to the traditional ecological knowledge of the Gubby Gubby traditional owners. This was recognised as an important source of information to support restoration suitability modelling. I note and I agree and commend the TNC for appointing a Gubby Gubby representative on the TAG in recognition of this. I believe that a member of one of our historic fishing families would also provide valuable information regarding fish ecology and behaviours that could be used in conjunction with the knowledge gained from TNC scientists.
Can I speak to that? I'd just like to speak to that with reference to the General Committee Report, 15th July 2019, page 12 of 43, where point A, number 3, respects both the traditional owner and historic commercial fishing family heritage, and it is to be considered for inclusion as a core element of the Noosa River Plan 2019. And also in that same report, the project from the Nature Conservancy states that the project or event for which they are applying benefits the residents of the community, and they would like, their full intention is to include community for the purpose of public interest. So I support this recommendation to include the fishing families on this group. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, can I just confirm which report the council was referring to there? Is that the
General Committee Meeting Report, 15th July 2019.
Oh, okay, from 2019, not the one this
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I absolutely endorse the comments of Councillor Finzel and Councillor Lawrenson that the commercial fishing families and their representatives certainly do have a valuable contribution to make that needs to be taken on board as this project moves forward in the partnership with TNC and all the stakeholders and the council. The question I have is that, and it's been raised, that the technical advisory group, and we have heard this, principally state government bureaucrats as well as, well, I should say state government officers, bureaucrat is a dirty word, state government officers as well as council officers and the Nature Conservancy and Cubby representatives. The stakeholders listed in the report are also quite vast and also include other groups and individuals that also have very worthy contributions to make. So if we were going to include commercial fishers in this group, there's also equally worthy groups that and individuals that should also be included. But this is not to disregard the contribution that the commercial fishing families can make. It's a question of what is the most appropriate vehicle for them to engage and make the contribution through. And we see in the Mayor's motion, Part C, is the establishment of a Noosa River Stakeholder Reference Group to provide strategic input, local knowledge and expertise into river management initiatives, initially providing input into this particular project and more broadly into finalisation and implementation of the Noosa River Plan. I certainly, and I don't think there's a council around this table that wouldn't think that commercial fishers should not be engaged in that capacity in the stakeholder reference group. We'll make sure of that. But I do support the staff, the recommendation that the TAG remain a technical group principally, whose principal goal and objective is to advance the permitting process through state government. So I support the intent to involve the commercial fishing families, but I just question the vehicle by which we wish to engage them, and I would suggest the more appropriate place would be through the Noosa River Stakeholder Reference Group.
In reply to Councillor Lawrenson's motion, I firmly believe that increased community participation and consultation is absolutely paramount to the success of this project. Indeed, historical extracts from relevant documents would support this wholeheartedly. Going back January 2019, and the report which was brought by Councillor to the General Committee agenda specifically noted in risks and opportunities that the prioritisation of the next phase of the Oyster Reef project of this partnership proposal provides a greater opportunity to better engage with and involve local, recreational and commercial fishermen as part of a second and third stage of the Oyster Reef project who are not heavily engaged in the first stage of the project. Early community engagement is proposed to build support and understanding of the proposed next phases of the project and also provide for volunteering opportunities. So I do support Councillor Lawrenson's motion. Thank you.
I think we're all going to agree on one point, and that is that local knowledge accumulated after decades of activity and fishing on the Noosa River is a valuable expertise. Mm-hmm. There is no doubt, and the the references to peer review literature, it is quite clear that all good management takes an understanding of local knowledge and traditional knowledge, as well as scientific expert knowledge. It is an expertise. It is something that is invaluable to any restoration project. But when I look at the terms of reference for the technical advisory group, I say the same thing that Councillor Wilkie does. And that is this the right group to get the most value out of the limited time of our local people? Do they provide ongoing expertise on the implementation of the project and support in overcoming legislative, scientific and practical barriers that occur during the term of the project? Are they people who want to see ensure that the project meets all technical, statutory and policy requirements in a timely manner to the satisfaction of relevant decision-making authorities, or ensure actions within the project plan are effectively delivered and communicated to all stakeholders? I believe, while they could have a role, I think that there is no doubt in my mind that the best place and the most appropriate place for that representation is in the stakeholder reference group. Their local expertise needs to be acknowledged, but as Councillor Wilkie said, the people who've been picking up litter for decades along the river also have local expertise. The people who've been looking after other aspects of the river that may be available to the stakeholder reference group are equally important. And it's equally important that we do have a range of different stakeholders to inform the project. And I actually think that the project will benefit more if they don't sit on the technical advisory group, but the technical advisory group are informed by their input into the stakeholder reference group. For that reason, I won't support this amendment. If a further one came up with about ensuring they go into the stakeholder reference group, I would be quite happy to support it.
Councillor Wagner.
Look, earlier this week, I asked for.
Standing.
Oh, sorry. Earlier this week, I asked.
Is this a
for,
question?
Oh, well, I asked for more information that we. Did staff say that they would give more information on this?
Yeah, I think
You did ask.
your question was whether there'd be any feedback from the state government bureaucrats in terms of whether we had external members on there. I think that was what you were asking.
It was councillor involvement at that stage.
Oh, councillor involvement. Sorry, it was a different question. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That was a different question.
Yeah.
It was a different question. Sorry about that. My apologies.
Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Wagner?
It just seems to me that this is council micromanaging something, and we probably, when council gets too involved in something like this, it becomes a micromanager. I love having a scientist coming in and overseeing it. I love the stakeholder reference group, but I'm just worried that this is micromanaging and it sets a bad precedent.
Councillor Drusovich.
Yeah. Look, I appreciate the intent of where the council's trying to go with this and trying to probably resolve elements of rift that have developed over this project and all the elements of the under the title "Bring Back the Fish" that seem to have offended a particular element within our community. But yeah, I'm looking at what the tag is there and intended to do. I appreciate there's an expertise within the commercial fishing families. I agree, it's probably without a doubt belongs within the Noosa River Stakeholder Reference Group. Could they be in both? Given that the parameters around what the Technical Advisory Group is to do is to facilitate the permit process and all of those bureaucratic processes that we have to get through in the first instance, and then beyond that, the situating of where reefs are best situated, there may be an element that can do that. But I honestly don't think that they would feel comfortable in amongst the technical aspect of permits and the like. So certainly a valued stakeholder, and all going forward, and their advice would be appreciated. I would hope that with the establishment of a necessary stakeholder group, that the TAFE would, if needed, be referred to them if there were questions to be raised. But I'm challenged by the process here, but I don't think it's absolutely the best fit in this case because of what the tag is intended to do.
Thank you. I think everyone has spoken to the motion. We might put it. Right of reply. Beg your pardon, Councillor Oyster.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the good points that have been made at this table. I think one of the reasons that I asked for a member of the historic fishing families to come on board is, again, just for community reassurance. The TAG membership has been appointed by the TNC, and I thought this might be an opportunity for age to sort of combine a community rep with someone with technical and local ecological knowledge that they can contribute to this group. I agree that there's also a great place for them to be on the stakeholder reference group, and I actually think that there's a place, in both groups for them. But again, thank you for the good debate.
Okay. We'll put it to a vote. All in favour of Councillor Lawrenston's amendment? That's Councillor Binzel, Stewart and Lawrenston. Against? Jurisic, the remainder. Yep. So we go back to the original motion.
I think everyone has spoken to that, except for Councillor Lawrence, who's the only one that hasn't spoken on the original motion.
Councillor Lawrenston, the original motion.
Original motion? No, I approve the original motion.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. No, I approve the recommendations, excuse me.
Oh,
so you got
amendments.
Yep.
No, sorry.
To move the all in favour of this motion.
Wait a minute. This is the original.
The original. I'm thinking the amendment. No, we're talking original motion.
What's the original?
Which has your amendment concerning that?
Yeah.
So just to explain that, so what the process. Councillor Stewart moved a motion which included additional wording for what the General Committee had on Monday, which was the independent scientific expert review, if I can call it that. Then the motion or the amendment from Councillor Lawrenston was lost, so we're going back to the original motion. And that's what the Mayor has now called for a vote on.
I said the Mayor didn't take up the option of a right of reply.
Yeah, I will take up an option of right of reply. Look, thank you. Sorry, I think I would have thought my motion had come in under amended, so I do apologise on that. I do think this this project, I think that they're welcome additions. I think they will all add to greater transparency and I think more comfort to the community. And I thank Council for providing latitude in that respect. But I still come back to and I think these are all really welcome additions and I'm very happy that they're there. I just cannot support this motion of approving the project plan unless we had what was requested in regard to the historical and baseline data. I still think that's fundamental. But as I said, I do appreciate, I think it will be a greater and stronger project because of those amendments made. And I think it will provide more comfort to the community and I think it will provide more comfort to this council. So I thank you for that. I'll put it to a vote. All in favour?
To accept that?
All the gentlemen. Against? Pardon? Yes, I thought mine was an amendment. So we're going to the original motion to approve.
Isn't that what we just want?
That's it.
Yeah,
That's what we just gone through.
Yeah.
So,
that's right. Right process. But, so just to explain, what Councillor Stewart moved was the motion on Monday with the additional words of the
independent
scientific review, and that's what Council's just voted on.
Yeah. I'm fine.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Do we move on to the next item?
Let's go.
Item 3 is on the agenda is a Yurol Ringtail Environment Project. I understand Councillor Stockwell.
if you can bring up my
Well, again.
Oh,
declaration,
War and
please.
Peace.
Declaration.
There's no motion, can only amend the
Oh,
motion.
sorry.
There we go.
Someone else could have moved it, you could have moved it, you moved the motion.
Okay.
Going on now.
So I wish to declare a perceived conflict of interest under the Local Government Act due to the fact that as a sole trader in my business Watershed Australia, I have both been contracted by and subcontracted officers of the Noosa and District Land Care prior to becoming a councillor. This included taking a paid 2-day consultancy facilitating a meeting of Land Care members in 2015 and also subcontracting Land Care for a project of similar length. I advise that there's no network nexus between the work that I undertook for Land Care prior to becoming councillor and the matter before us. I am an ordinary member of the group, a long-standing association including a councillor representative that assisted in its foundation in 1989. I have collegial relationships dating back to the 1980s with members of the Land Care councillors. I've previously provided a very detailed list of that item. I won't bore you with it again, but if you do take that into consideration, both as a professional role as a state government public service and also in relationship with my members of the other relations I have with members of the current Land Care Committee. Since Monday I have sought advice on this matter from the section in the department that the Integrity Commissioner referred me to. I am confident that I only have a perceived conflict of interest. I am confident that no member of my family, myself, that there is no close associate of mine that will benefit from the matters being discussed. As a result, I believe I can consider this item impartially and in the public interest and request to remain in the meeting room to participate in debate and vote on this matter.
CEO, I just asked one question with regard to the involvement of Land Care in the Yurol and Ringtail project. I mean, my understanding is this is negotiations between the state, HQ Plantations, Noosa Parks Association and Council, and that Land Care has no direct involvement in the process going forward. Can you just confirm that?
Sure. Land Care were not what I call the original project partners, so that was the state government, 3 departments, Council, Noosa Parks Association and HQ Plantations. The negotiations that are underway at the moment are between the state government, Greenfleet, Noosa Parks Association and Council. Land Care have done some work on the land with funding provided by a third party, which was the Body Shop philanthropic organisation. That didn't come through Council, I had no involvement with Council, that's a separate matter. But there's been no funding provided to Land Care in relation to this matter from Council.
Based on that, I'll move the resolution. The Council's note the perceived conflict of interest declaration of Councillor Stockwell, and resolve this represents a perceived conflict of interest in the matter, and the Councillor Stockwell may remain in the meeting room to participate in the debate and vote on this matter.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Do it.
Oh,
Can we speak on the matter, or is that?
yes,
You
yes.
can ask questions.
You can ask questions.
The mover will have to, if you wish to speak.
Do you
with
speak to it?
No, I think I've asked my question.
Councillor, do you have a question?
Well, first, I'd like to ask your advice, Brett, on this, Brian, because we've gone through this several times with Brian Stockwell.
Yeah, sure. And I guess probably for the 3rd time today, talked about conflicts of interest. And you know, probably restate what I said before is that it's natural and okay for councillors to have conflicts of interest because you live in the community, you're involved in the community, you're in organisations, you have neighbours, friends, family, or whatever. The trick with conflicts of interest is to make sure you declare them and that they're dealt with appropriately. When you look at conflicts of interest, really you're looking at a couple of things, and you've heard me talk before about a continuum where, you know, at one extreme where you have a personal matter, you have a contract with the council yourself. Well, clearly that's at the one end of the scale. At the other end, you've got a third cousin who once, you know, did some work for council or whatever. So you've always got that continuum in terms of what that relationship should be. And the Act actually gives some guidance on that. For example, if you're a current board member of an organisation, then there is no exemption. If you're an ordinary member, there is an exemption. Then the question comes in between, if you're a past board member, was it last year or was it 25 years ago? And that sense of nexus comes in there as well. The other element is in terms of the nexus for the degree to which the other party is involved in the matter before the council. In fact, I hadn't thought about this before. An example would be the previous matter where the mayor indicated that she knew one of the family of one of the 5 families who may or may not become on a working group. So that's quite a remote nexus. So the same thing here, you know, to what extent in this case is Landcare currently involved? They're not involved in a contract or any arrangement or funding from council. They've done some work on the land with funding from a third party. Council doesn't own that land or have tenure at the moment. So it's a relatively remote nexus. But as always, as I've said this before to councillors, I can give you advice, but ultimately you need to make the decision in terms of whether you see it's perceived conflict of interest and whether or not the councillor remains in the room.
Okay. Well, in the past, Brian's left the room several times, and I just find that that's a very chilling precedent to ask him to leave, because the nexus is distant between what he's done and the conflict of interest. He's on the very low end of the spectrum. And, you know, under these conditions and under this precedent, you know, I, for one, will not be working with any local community groups in any sort of advocative role at all. And then I would worry, you know, Amelia may be interested in advocating for the Airbnbs or the short-term tenancy, but if, you know, she could be tarred with the same brush. I mean, it seems as though we're really focusing on a very end of the bottom end of the scale. And even Karen with Pomona, you know, if anything comes up about Pomona, it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, Karen might have a conflict of interest. Or the mayor has a fishing family and we're talking about oysters, you know. I would like us to get together and basically get some rules here amongst ourselves, because it is up to the vote here, regardless of the tests that are given to us by the state. It's up to us to kind of figure this out, because I think that all of us will be chilled a little bit by getting involved with community groups in the future if we just have such a standard that the precedence goes, it gives us a terrible standard to work with.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to note and acknowledge Councillor Stockwell's the fact that you went to the Integrity Commissioner and did some due diligence. I acknowledge that and appreciate that. And I have actually reconsidered my earlier position, and I do think you can add value to this debate. And I do believe that that a reasonable and fair-minded person in the room would believe that you will make a decision that is not contrary to the public interest.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Wilkie.
I'm very moved by what the significance of what Councillor Lawrence said, because it's about making fair and equitable decisions and about allowing people to stay in the room after having done the right thing by making the declarations and then adding value to our discussions so that we can be assured as a group that we're making the most informed decisions. So, Councillor Lawrence, thank you very much for your consideration on this issue and the way you've approached it. I do appreciate it.
Anyone else like to speak? We might put it to a Councillor speech. Sure. Sorry, Councillor.
That's all right. Look, I appreciate something that Councillor Wigner has said has alluded me to. Just go back with regard to when Councillor Stockwell does leave the room in relation to matters those. He's always forthright in declaring his perceived or conflicts of interest or otherwise, where there is a direct relationship or a direct value to an entity such as Landcare. Councillor Stockwell always leaves the room. And I respect and admire him for that, because he does take his perceived conflict of interest or other conflicts of interest very, very seriously. He has done the right thing and gone and double-checked with the Integrity Commissioner that there is no issue here. As Landcare is not directly involved in this process, I see no issue with or any conflict at all in this matter. And what was the last point I was going to say? as our resident environmental expert on our council, I see that his value to any debate on environmental issues is one that we should welcome at the table every time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just a point of clarification? I think I said it right.
You did.
The Integrity Commissioner has advised that they're too busy to consider these matters and referred me to a member of the department. It was the department that I ran the scenarios by and gave me advice, and hence how I made that declaration.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell, for being so transparent in that regard. We'll put the council resolution to a vote. All in favour? Unanimous. So there is.
We need to have to deal with that.
Yep, the ringtail. There is.
I'll move it, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. And
I'll
second,
happily
thank
second that.
you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Would anyone like to speak to the motion? We have a recommendation on page.
We need to then put that to a vote.
Put that to a vote.
That
Yes.
particular one.
All in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. Item. We have a committee. Oh, we've done that one. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Item 4 is an update on council grant funding allocations. Item 5 is the financial performance report, June 2020 interim position. Item 6 is for the Planning and Environment Court Appeal, number BD 1605 of 2020 at 191 Hollett Road, Noosaville.
And on that one, Mayor, there's some alternative wording that staff have looked at in consultation with our lawyers and have provided that.
I'm happy to move it, and I'll read it out because of the changes. The council note report by the Manager Development Assessment to General Committee meeting dated 13th of July 2020 regarding Planning and Environment Court Appeal number BD 1605 and of 2020, and A, agree to allow the appeal as the proposed changes to the subdivision plan are considered minor and would be an improved outcome for the site in comparison with the approved subdivision plan, given the changes reduce the development's footprint and numbers of lots from 52 to 40. B, note that allowing this appeal does not in any way alter the council's legal position in relation to the 4 other current planning and environment appeals over the site concerning the extension of the original development approval or diminish its strong opposition to subdivision of the land, which considers would be a fundamental conflict with planning requirements for the site under the plan and South East Queensland Regional Plan.
Sorry, can I just confirm the track changes on that from what was, that reads to me exactly the same as what was in the General Committee. Can I just see the track change?
That's General Committee. Hang on.
Thank you.
Need a second?
Thank you.
I'll second this motion. Thank you, Kylie. Councillor Stockwell.
We are before the courts on this one, so I'll be brief. Yes, on Monday's committee I asked for the councillor's planning and environment solicitor to have a look over the wording. My understanding is that's who has provided this enhanced wording, and I think it does more clearly and strongly put our position, and I think it is preferable to go down this track than the previous one that came out of committee.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Kylie. On the bottom of page 16, we have, thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Thank you, Councillor Duricevic. All in favour? Thank you. Item 9, we have no ordinary meeting reports. We have no confidential session. We have had no questions submitted from public question time. Councillors, the next ordinary meeting will be held on the 20th of August 2020 at the Council Chambers here in Tewantin. Thank you, councillors. It's been a long day.